You probably remember when ChatGPT exploded on the scene. It really felt like everything changed overnight.
Absolutely. And while we were all distracted with the shiny new toy that was ChatGPT, Google was rolling out their quiet master plan behind the scenes.
A plan that wasn't just about fighting back. It was methodically taking control of an entire AI battlefield. According to some web traffic analysis, the results are startling. In just a year, its generative AI market share saw a massive jump.
This is the story of how the tech giant is winning the AI war, not just with flashy demos, but with a brutal three-step strategy that's already working its way into our daily lives.
If you are new to the show, welcome. On this show, we move past the headlines and look at the why behind the world's most innovative technology. Every week, we research and report on fierce competition between the tech giants and the startups fighting for domination in an AI era. And our goal is to give you the tech insider perspective on who is winning, who is losing, and how these tech wars affect your world. So if you want to stay ahead of the curve, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications, you never miss a deep dive. But today, let's break down the battle between OpenAI and Google for AI supremacy. So let's rewind a little bit. When ChatGPT launched, it sent a legit shockwave through Silicon Valley.
And for a minute there, it really looked like a potential game over for Google's search. We all remember that, right? OpenAI's chatbot became the fastest growing app in history, pulling in hundreds of millions of users who were hooked on its creative and conversational power.
The media had crowned a new king, and inside Google, things went into overdrive.
The question on everyone's mind was, how could the search giant possibly compete with something that felt like it came from the future?
And while it looked like Google was scrambling, it actually was kicking off a long-term strategy into gear, one built on its biggest, most untouchable strengths.
And this was never about building a rival chatbot. It was about rewiring the entire massive structure, the entire empire around AI.
The plan was simple but devastatingly effective. It's unfolding in three key steps. First, Google played its ultimate trump card, its ecosystem. With over 90% of search market, its stranglehold on mobile with Android, and deep roots in business through Google Workspace.
And that's the key. It's distribution. There are tons of people that are already using Google. Think about it. You have to go to ChatGPT, but Google is bringing Gemini directly to you where you're already at. It's being woven straight into search, into Gmail, into the entire G Suite, the workspace, and the phone that's in many billions of people's pockets.
This strategy is especially powerful with businesses. Google's cloud division has become an AI juggernaut. With a strong year-over-year growth, it's using its existing relationships to push Gemini into the corporate workflows.
And that turns it from a simple tool into a platform that businesses cannot ignore. For companies already using Google services, which is many, adopting Gemini, it's not a tough choice. It's just seamless, natural. It's there.
Google's second step was to make AI incredibly efficient. For over a decade, Google has been designing its own custom AI chips called the Tensor Processing Unit, or TPUs.
This gives them a massive, almost unfair advantage. While OpenAI has had to pay premium for chips, these are from NVIDIA, these are GPUs, not TPUs, and rent server space from others like Microsoft. Google, they have the whole stack from top to bottom.
This allows Google to run its AI models with brutal efficiency. They can offer powerful AIs to developers and businesses for a fraction of what rivals charge.
And this puts immense financial pressure on competitors like OpenAI, which reportedly burns through huge amounts of cash to operate. Google is essentially turning AI into a commodity, a game that only very few giant companies can truly afford to play in the long run.
So, are the results of this plan showing up? It looks like it. While ChatGPT is still the leader in standalone chatbot use, its dominance is being challenged.
Right. And over the past year, its share of web traffic has started to slip, falling from a peak of nearly 87% to around 65%, according to one analysis.
And in that same period, The same data shows Google Gemini web traffic shares have surged from 5.7% to 21.5%.
And while, of course, web traffic doesn't tell the whole story and excludes app usage, it points to a fundamental shift in the AI landscape. More and more users seem to be favoring AI assistants that are baked right into the services that they already use every day.
Okay, so let's summarize some of the research here, right? OpenAI and ChatGPT definitely won the first battle. They captured the world's imaginations, showed everyone the power of large language models.
Right, but Google is playing a different game. They've been around for a while. They know this space. They've been planning this for a while. It's a 3-step plan using its ecosystem, its distribution it already has, flexing its infrastructure, this tall stack that we are talking about, and flawlessly integrating it directly into the market, into the products people are already using. And it's built for the long haul.
While OpenAI is building groundbreaking products, Google has been building an AI-powered empire.
And the fight for AI supremacy, it's no longer just about features. It is a war of distribution and efficiency, a war that Google was built to win.
They might be winning. So let's give some commentary. We've done our research part. Now let's provide some thoughts on how Google might win, how OpenAI might win, what the pivots and what the future could look like here. So when I'm researching this, it reminds me of a previous battle of two tech giants, Nick. So in 1995, Netscape had roughly 90% market share in web browsing. It was the coolest company in tech, but Microsoft realized that people are fundamentally digitally lazy and they will use whatever is already in front of them.
Digitally lazy. I love that. It's true.
It's true. So they baked Internet Explorer into Windows operating system, and Microsoft destroyed Netscape's growth without ever having to build a better browser. So the lesson learned here is that Google doesn't need Gemini to be better than ChatGPT. It just needs to be everywhere. If Gemini is the button already inside your Gmail, will you bother opening ChatGPT, or are you going to be digitally lazy? They're probably digitally lazy, right? Because a lot of the AI models now, it used to be about which model's better at training, which model's better at computing. It's kind of commoditized now. So in a way, OpenAI is the new Netscape. But the twist here is that OpenAI has Microsoft money, which is kind of ironic.
Totally.
Because in the 90s, Netscape fought Microsoft alone. And today, OpenAI is funded by Microsoft to take down Google. It's a proxy war where a 1990s giant, which is Microsoft, is using a 2020 startup, OpenAI, to get revenge on the company that took its web browsing crown, Google. It's like a full circle fight here, Nick.
Funny.
It is
it's
wild.
It's just Google can just like hang around and be there, like kind of a lame boyfriend that you just like can't kick out of your house. It's just like, it's just there. I guess it's good enough, right? Right? At Google's, they're ramping it up too. We're seeing Gemini everywhere now. I mean, even a year ago, it was not anywhere like it is today.
No, it changed so quick. It changed so quick, Nick. If you remember back in 2022, back December 2022, when ChatGPT launched, Google, despite inventing the underlying transforming technology, realized that they were behind the consumer interface. There was a huge panic going on at Google, and they issued a code red internally. CEO Sundar reportedly upended work on numerous groups and brought back the reclusive founders, Larry Page and Sergey Brin. And the quote was, "Google's management has declared a code red. It is a moment of significance for Google's primary business, which is search." And everyone was like, okay, ChatGPT is going to take over. Google's in big trouble here. And then fast forward now to 2025, OpenAI issues a code red. It's like, it just switches back and forth at who's winning. So Google releases Gemini 3. It topples the LM Arena leaderboard and passed the doctoral level reasoning benchmark. Google announced Gemini has reached 650 million monthly users, rapidly closing the gap. And now Sam Altman ordered a strategic retreat. He identified and paused all high-profile projects like AI advertising, healthcare shopping agents, and personal assistants put on pause and pivoted all engineers back to ChatGPT core model. So it is kind of crazy how these two companies are going back and forth. I think the winner is kind of the consumer because we're getting incredible value out of these two competing.
Totally, right? We want them as consumers. We want them competing, trying to outdo each other, right?
Now, as of today, as of the recording, if we were to look at specifically the consumer use case for AI, who is going to be spending subscription money on AI models? I think Google is in a much better position to do this. I think Google will certainly win the consumer model because they just have too many advantages like the ones we outlined, but it's built in, right? It's built into Android. It's built into Chrome. It's built into search. They have data advantages. They have YouTube. They have Maps. They have Gmail. They have Google Photos. They have They have a hardware advantage with the lower cost, higher scale custom TPUs. So I think they're just positioned to take over this consumer market so well, and they're going to do it so cheaply. Not only are they going to do it cheaply, but you've got open source models from China coming in. It seems like the consumer AI race is a race to the bottom, Nick.
Yeah. So one advantage OpenAI has over Google is the freshness. I mean, there's something about a new company. Granted, OpenAI has been around for a while, but there has to be so much energy and much less baggage at OpenAI compared to Google, right?
Yep.
I mean, you talked about Google CEO, how he was having to upend work of a lot of groups, right? Like that's a lot of work to kind of just like go in and like, guys, you aren't moving fast enough, and like you can't get them to move fast enough, and then you have to move them somewhere else. Like it takes real work and time and money to drum up that momentum, that energy, and sometimes it never happens at a company that's gotten a little bit slower, a little bit lazier, right? And OpenAI has had that advantage. However, having said that, it is impressive that at Google that was known for like, hanging around, eating lunch all day and being lazy, right? They've kind of pulled it off a little bit. I'm impressed. I'm surprised. I really thought, like we mentioned before, ChatGPT comes and it's like Google's over, right? Because it's like fewer people are using search. That's their cash cow. And I just don't see a world where they're going to be able to kind of get these people off the couch and get to building again. But they're figuring it out. It's pretty impressive.
I think it is really impressive. To your point, OpenAI is a smaller, more agile company. And they don't run into the innovator's dilemma that innovators, big companies run into, where a big company, if they want to innovate and change their business model, it cannibalizes their existing model sometimes, right?
Oh,
so
totally.
That was the concern with Google's innovation is that, okay, if they move to AI, it's going to disrupt their whole search business. How are they going to monetize AI when they've already built a very profitable monetization strategy for search? And that's going to continue with other aspects that, work into this whole battle. Where I think OpenAI could win at, if they pivot and successfully win at, I think they could win at actually the enterprise space. So the enterprise space, which I worked in for about 15 years there, enterprise software space, is still very much up for grab. And this is a different conversation where OpenAI could compete. So essentially the enterprise space, there's a couple ways that OpenAI could win. So when we're comparing the models, OpenAI has you could say Google is a cheaper, faster AI model, where OpenAI is using a strategy that uses a little bit more of a complex inference compute time to get a little bit longer of a quality answer. Now, their thought is that, hey, do you want a quick answer or do you want to wait a little bit to get a more in-depth quality answer? From a consumer use case, they're not going to wait. Not going to wait at all. However, from an enterprise application standpoint, what OpenAI could do is essentially open, and they already have started to do this, the OpenAI App Store, which will allow developers to build applications on top of the OpenAI software development kit. So they could essentially roll out specific applications to enterprises. So like an example of this would be if a company wants to build a legal review agent. Legal review is a huge challenge for enterprises, I did software sales. When I would get a deal done, it would take a year to review, and then it would take another year of legal review to get it closed. That's 2 years.
Really? You mean
2 years?
All of the sales product stuff that would take a whole year, which is reasonable, and then a whole other year just for lawyers to go back and forth with their red marks and everything, even though everyone's like ready to go?
Yes. Mid-market, less. Maybe mid-market, you could get away with 3 to 4 months of redlining, but enterprise like Fortune 500, oh man, I had one take 18 months. 18 months.
As a sales guy, where your compensation is based on that deal closing, that has to be infuriating, right?
It's infuriating, not only from a sales perspective, but it does bring to the higher point of bigger companies not being as agile as smaller companies. Imagine if you're a large company that needs to buy and innovate on their software stack and get up to date, but it takes you 2 years to buy a software.
And with a fast-moving tech like this, like 2 years is an eternity, right?
Exactly. So if OpenAI can pivot and take on the enterprise model, right? Let's say you're building a legal review agent using OpenAI's tools and then sell it to other firms. OpenAI essentially makes money on the API usage plus potentially a platform fee. And why this is really appealing is it's a lot more higher margin business than the consumer, which is what you said, a race to the bottom. So the higher margin reasoning premiums could be a better fit for ChatGPT's model, right? They've got this strategy of inference time compute, meaning they're charging enterprises not just for the output, but the thinking time. So for high stakes tasks like drug discovery, architectural engineering, companies will pay more for a pro set to offer superior logic. So it is a little bit of owning this high value, low volume market where the margins might be 80%, why Google fights for the low value, high volume margin where the razors are margin thin. And therefore, they're not necessarily competing then versus Google for the consumer market. They're competing in the enterprise space, right? They're competing versus Salesforce, versus ServiceNow, versus Zendesk. So they could compete and knock out those people, which is a huge opportunity for growth right there. A huge opportunity for growth. So it's really more of a SaaS consolidation play that OpenAI could be successful in, rather than just being a consumer product that people are using to generate funny photos. It's a much bigger value prop.
And it's interesting. A lot of this Google versus OpenAI conversation, a lot of it started drumming up a few weeks ago when Google released Gemini 3. That really surprised a lot of people. It had actually been a while since people were impressed with a new version of a foundation model. People were shocked at how good Gemini 3 is. And I've had conversations with people where it's like, aren't we past, like, aren't the models good enough? Like, who cares who has the smartest model? People are barely using them now. And maybe that's true for consumers,
Yes.
right? But for enterprise, it may make a huge difference.
Yep.
Right. I mean, you're the expert here. Like, one, you might be able to do certain things, certain areas of legal work or something else that if you're smart enough, you can actually do it. But Peter, do you think like that would make a difference on closing the deal if people looked at the benchmarks and saw that Gemini's scoring better than OpenAI, they might be like, well, this seems like this is the smarter model and Google's more capable, so we better go with them.
I don't know that specifically will move the needle in an enterprise decision. I think it's more about what applications will be built from the software development kits.
Okay.
That will benefit the specific use cases that enterprises want. And will software companies who are looking to build these applications, will they use Google? Will they use OpenAI? And then they will evaluate, okay, which is the better tech stack to build on? And part of that will be which is the better model performance, especially for more complex tasks. OpenAI has a better model if they're doing this inference time compute. So yes, it does, but it's
indirectly.
More indirectly.
Yeah,
indirectly.
Of course. Now that you say it like that, it's so obvious. It's not like that's how they're making their buying decisions, looking at the benchmarks, right? They need their problem solved, right? And exactly like you said, if it's smarter and it's able to solve their problems, this model is, and this one is not, then that's how they're going to buy, right? It is impressive how good Gemini 3 is. It's like one-shotting applications before that were just not possible before.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Google, so Google also can compete in the enterprise space, right? They have Google Cloud, they have contracts in place. I think what can challenge them in this innovator's dilemma is that, for them to build an app store and so on, they already have the Google App Store. So it might cannibalize that if they come up with a Gemini App Store for distribution. So it's a little bit of, are they going to focus on that, or are they going to cannibalize the Google Play Store if they do that? So there is an innovator's dilemma there. What gets complex here, Nick, which gets complex with this pivot of OpenAI and trying to go after the enterprise model, is that Microsoft is a pretty big player in the enterprise AI space currently. They have Copilot Studio, they have Azure AI Modeling Catalog, which is interesting because Microsoft funds OpenAI, or at least they did when OpenAI was truly a joint venture. Now they're like, wait a minute, now you're became a public benefit corporation. competing versus us perhaps in the enterprise space. If there's a partnership that can be made there, a further partnership that can be made in the enterprise space, that could be a really winning strategy for Microsoft and OpenAI and could really own the enterprise space, which is a very high margin space.
Yeah, man, innovator's dilemma. How infuriating must it be for Google, right? At least for some of the engineers that really wanted to push this forward. The engineers at Google invented the transformer, right? Everything that ChatGPT is based on. And it was just a cute little project at Google. Like, that's neat, but like, remember, we make billions of dollars with search and like, we don't like need to like do anything. So like, you can keep playing around, but like, we are not interested in one, putting a lot of resources behind your cute project, and two, definitely not interested if this has a chance to cannibalize our cash cow here, right? So in a way, it does make sense that this would be developed at a Google, but then Google would not be the first to market with this, right?
Yeah, they'd have to have their hand forced, just like all the old on-premise software companies had to have their hand forced to go into cloud, and that's just how this innovator's dilemma works.
Right.
If you have your existing business built on old business models, old technology, and a disruptor comes in, it's a real dilemma. It's a real dilemma because if you're a publicly traded company, you can't miss your numbers. But you got to compete with the newest technology, which was going to cannibalize your existing one. So if OpenAI can pivot to a place where they're putting Google back in this dilemma, really back in this dilemma, especially in the enterprise space, I think that's their path. But there's other paths they could take. There's other pivots they could take, Nick. What are your thoughts? How can OpenAI make a pivot here to better compete? Because right now it looks like they're getting their lunch eaten. Yeah.
Well, okay. So there is a theme here, right? On who's going to win, who's going to beat who. The theme is really, when you think about it, people aren't using AI all that much. When you think about the hours during the day, right? People will every other day open up ChatGPT and ask a question, at least consumers, right? It's like, oh, wow, that's cool. I use it all the time, right? But look at the slices throughout the day, throughout the week, the month, right? The LLMs are not doing all that much work per person, right? And so Google's solving that by putting it into their existing products, their distribution, right? And that, when we know OpenAI is looking at getting more LLM use through consumer hardware. Right. I found the idea of AI consumer hardware very interesting for a very long time. But it's like, for so long, it was like, what would you use that for? Right. And there is still kind of that question, but there's enough interest that people will buy this OpenAI Mysterioso product they're putting out. Supposedly it's like the form factor of a pen, right? With like a camera in the tip. There were some leaks. It does still feel like they're not quite sure what it is. Consumer hardware is very tricky. You know, from my days at Tile, we got really lucky there that we found something that a lot of consumers really wanted, an item locator, and then we made some good decisions and built it correctly, built the company and the product correctly. But consumer hardware is tricky, and the market is they are unforgiving. If they don't like the way a certain button clicks and everyone decides that, they're just not going to buy your product. Johnny Ive at OpenAI, I mean, obviously there's probably no one better in the world to have working on the design of your product if you need to define exactly what it does and how it looks and feels, right? It will be very interesting to see if and when OpenAI release their hardware product, what that does to the rest of the market, what that does with Google. How does Google react to that, right? Certainly Google has put out some hardware products and they have some distribution. For a while, they were not very good at hardware, meaning consumer hardware. They have gotten better. They're not exceptional. It will be interesting to see if Google pulls a code red on consumer hardware.
So right now, the consumer device strategy for AI is just your cell phone, your smartphone. Like that is how you use AI from a device strategy, your laptop too. But what other device potentially could AI leverage to compete with cell phone use? Like what could OpenAI is not going to win the cell phone race. There's no way they're going to.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe they'll. I don't think they're going to try and compete in that category, smartphones. Is it going to be a pendant? Is it going to be a listening device? Is it going to be smart glasses, headphones? Like, it's hard for me to picture because those devices have been tried and not a lot of success. They're very tough to pull off.
Yeah. So one way people like to look at this is that you want to pick something that's already familiar, and then you have your change, your tweak to it, right? What are some form factors that humans use? I don't mean tech products. I mean, that humans use, they wear every day. And an obvious choice is glasses, right? I'm wearing them right now. I don't know if you noticed. And I wear them every day because I can't see without them, right? There are huge advantages for glasses. They're next to people's ears. They're next to people's eyes. You get the perspective of what they're looking at. Big advantages for glasses. It makes a lot of sense in some ways. In other ways, it makes no sense, because if you wear glasses, you do not want to wear other glasses. If you do not wear glasses, you do not want to wear glasses.
No,
so,
I don't want to wear glasses.
Right? And that's not even, I don't even know if that's the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge is the amount of volume inside of glasses. There's no room there. And a lot of the stuff that AI wants to do, namely a camera on all the time, you need a lot of battery and you put out a lot of heat. There's just, like, it sounds great for a sci-fi movie, but the silicon technology isn't there yet. People are pushing, though. Meta's pushing hard on glasses, and they may eventually get there, and they have a lot of juicy bucks they can throw at it, and they will eventually get there. One form factor, like over-ear headphones. These have the volume, right? Like more than 10 times the volumetric volume versus glasses, right? But people don't want to wear these around every day, obviously, right? But they are a familiar form factor that could work. Earbuds, less volume than glasses, right? No room for a lot of this stuff. Now, it of course depends on what exactly you're doing. I'm assuming now, as I'm ranting through this, that you're going to want a camera in there. You can do a lot of audio stuff with very little battery. And we're starting to see some of these products come out. CES is running right now in Las Vegas. There are a ton of rings, I guess. Oh. The Pebble co-founder, remember that Pebble smartwatch? Eric Migalkovsky, brilliant guy. He started Pebble. They had not a great acquisition because the hardware's freaking hard. And then he went off and had a lot of success starting another software company. And now he's getting back to his roots, bought the old Pebble brand. They're putting out watches again, and they just launched a little ring, right? That can take audio notes. Really cool to see this comeback. The ring thing, like maybe, but to me so far, there's not a clear like killer use case for consumer hardware. And that is like for a hardware company, for a consumer hardware company, that is step one. You can skip over that step and lie to yourselves and raise some money, but you're going to pay for it later. Look at freaking Humane, right? They knew they didn't have something. That's why they took so much time to launch what they were building and kept raising money. It's really hard unless you have lightning in a bottle out of the gate with hardware. And then if you do have lightning in a bottle out of the gate with hardware, then Google and Amazon and Apple turn their heads and they're like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. We could do that better, cheaper, faster, right?
So Humane was the AI pin. That's correct?
God, what a terrible form factor.
So there's been a lot of failures in the hardware space. Because Rabbit, remember the Rabbit? I think they still be trying to make that a thing.
People call that a failure. They put it out there. That works. You can still buy it.
Okay.
Great. They tried.
It might work out.
Yeah.
But how are they going to pivot? Because if we're looking now, OpenAI came out swinging hard. They won round one. Google came back, round 1, too. OpenAI is kind of on the ropes right now. They need a pivot. They're going head to head in the consumer space in what looks like a losing battle, a race to the bottom. They can pivot into enterprise. There's a good opportunity there. They can pivot into hardware, but man, that's a hard problem to solve. I don't see them getting into smartphones. I don't see them getting into robotics. I could be wrong. I don't see them getting into self-drive. Like, how are they going to pivot and compete? Sam Altman, he's got to do some deep thinking here. He's going to have to go to the desert. He's going to have to really, really do maybe a Steve Jobs type of retreat here.
I also think the reality here with with OpenAI and with OpenAI versus Google is like, we're talking about who's going to win, but it's like, what does win even mean? And I think the reality is OpenAI is going to do quite well and Google is going to do quite well. And we're in the throes of this competition now, which is actually quite healthy for both companies and really great for consumers as well. And they themselves at the companies, the engineers or product managers, they are also having this conversation. We got to win, which is great, right? But they are going to likely win in their own ways. OpenAI is not going to run out of money, right? They're going to do quite freaking well. I mean, they could, but they are a monstrous force. What were you going to say?
Don't completely agree. And here's why.
Really? Tell me. Okay.
Specifically consumer use cases, things change so quickly. So quickly. Enterprise is different. Enterprise, like I said, takes 2 years to purchase. It's not quickly. Consumers, if it's just a $20 per month, $30 per month subscription model, that can change within a year and they could lose the battle. And we saw that with Netscape, the consumer kind of use cases. We saw that before where, you could say, oh, they're both going to do well. Both Netscape and Microsoft will do well. Well, no, that's not what happened. That's not what happened. So unless I think they make a pivot, I think if they were to stick and try and fight in the consumer use case, they're in real trouble. They've got plenty of money and so on, but man, when the tides change and they're not reporting growth numbers and they're going down, it's not going to be a good situation there.
Yeah, but this is not the end state for these AI companies. This is not the last product. This is not the last business model for them, right? This is maybe a little play project to bring in some revenue and to get some use, right? We don't know what the future looks like. And that, I think, is the big value of OpenAI. That's why people invest. They don't invest because like, wow, you're raking in the $20 subscriptions. That's good, right? But the real value is the potential for the future, what this could be.
You're right. I mean, let's say OpenAI with a more advanced model fixes hallucination problems, and then all of a sudden the applications for AI, in the medical community and a lot of professional communities can blow up and it can do all types of things. There is unforeseen future scenarios here where they excel at. But as of today, from the consumer use case lane, Google's got them on the ropes.
Yeah. At least with the current configuration. Now, one thing I don't know if you agree. One thing I would love to see from OpenAI, and there were rumors about this maybe a year ago, is a competitor to Google's workspace, Google Docs, Google Sheets. Okay. I love Google Docs and Google Sheets, but it could use an update, and I don't think Google's going to do that. I just want someone with capable engineers and product people to come in and do a fresh version of that. I would freaking love that from OpenAI. I wonder why they haven't done it. Would you like that? Yeah.
That's an interesting one. I believe they are getting in the web browser. I believe they are releasing a browser.
Oh, yeah, they've got it.
It's out now? Okay.
Yeah.
Or I don't know. I haven't. Atlas. That's right. So, that's going to be a tough one to compete in. But, I don't know. Maybe you're right. Maybe, again, that's kind of the enterprise play too. The workspaces both a consumer product and an enterprise product. Could they compete in that space? Sure, perhaps. Is there a better version of Google Sheets or Docs that uses AI better? I don't know. You're right. That's an opportunity there.
Yeah, ChatGPT, they put out their browser, Atlas, a few weeks ago, and I was so excited. I wasn't quite sure why I was excited to try it, but I was. And so then I downloaded it, and then I tried to run it, and it said you have to update your Mac OS. So I was like, fine, it's worth it, right? And then I updated Mac OS, and the new OS is so freaking annoying that I was then annoyed at OpenAI for forcing that on me, and now I haven't even opened Atlas. So consumers, flaky.
Consumers. So we're going to see how it plays out. We'll be updating you on this. This is a big battle of two of the biggest tech giants.
There's going to be a lot that's happening with this too. We will keep you updated.
Yes. Stay tuned. Subscribe for all the drama. Thanks again for listening. Appreciate it, everyone.
Thanks for tuning